Just a day after Liverpool informed Newcastle they were interested in Alexander Isak, they've now made their move for Newcastle's #1 target, Hugo Ekitike. Yeah, welcome along to the transfer show. And speaking of #1 targets, when we're talking transfers, the only two men that we want to speak to, Dharmesh Sheth and Mark McAdam. Great to see you guys. For the next hour, we're going to be discussing the moves that are on, the moves that are off, and those that could still develop. Marcus Rashford is heavily criticised by a former Manchester United and England forward. We'll assess what's next for the 5 players hoping to exit Old Trafford this summer. Ipswich have dropped out of the Premier League, but Amari Hutchinson might yet get to stay in the top league. We'll reveal who's after him and why the deal has run into problems. And Leeds are back in the big time and making moves. We'll bring you news from all top 20 top-flight clubs as they step up their pre-season work. Yeah, lots to come, but let's start with the two strikers whose futures appear to be intrinsically linked, or are they? OK, so we have to start with today's developments on Hugo Ekitike. Mark, just bring us right up to date with where we're at.
First things first, when you look at Alexander Isak and Hugo Ekitike, the important thing to point out, any potential deal would be a Liverpool club record, a Newcastle club record, and a Premier League club record.
Wow.
And when you talk big money, they're complicated deals to make happen. So that's why the last 24 hours has been quite intense for those fans, those people connected to the two clubs, and of course the two players and their representatives. Now, we start off with where we're at with regards to Hugo Ekitike. This is something we were saying yesterday on Sky Sports News, that there was an interest from Liverpool in the player. Today, we furthered that by saying Liverpool have opened talks with Eintracht Frankfurt over a potential deal for the 23-year-old. We know they've been keen on him for some time, as have Newcastle. They failed in an attempt to try and sign him before he joined PSG in the summer of 2022. Liverpool have made no formal offer at this stage, but we know negotiations are continuing between the two clubs. Someone that had an incredible season for Eintracht Frankfurt last season. He got 15 goals in the league with 8 assists. He was great in the Europa League as well with 7 goals and assists, and the same in the German Cup, 4 goals and assists. So he's generating big numbers, hence why there's interest from 2 of the elite Premier League sides. The backdrop to this is on Tuesday, Newcastle put their first bid in for Hugo Ekitike. That also happened to be around the time that Liverpool made an inquiry to Newcastle. Alexander Isak, is he potentially for sale? And Newcastle made it very clear, Isak not for sale under any circumstances. And then Liverpool said, OK, thank you very much. We're going to move on to another target, which, by the way, happens to be someone that you're very interested in, Hugo Ekitike.
Brilliant. I feel like it's rare that we see football transfer strategy so played out, just so clearly in the public like this, Dams. But it seems like Liverpool are in the stronger position of the two clubs here. Is that right? How would you see it?
This is really interesting to me, how these two potential transfers are playing out. Mark explained it really well there. But if you look at it, if we just take this on face value, first of all, Alexander Isak is of interest to Liverpool. Newcastle United have said Alexander Isak is not for sale. Hugo Ekitike is a player that Liverpool and Newcastle United are both interested in. So on face value, fine. That's the story. We don't need to worry about Isak anymore because he's not for sale. So clearly that story's gone.
Every player's for sale, aren't they?
But we do know that when a club is interested in a player, now we do this every single time during a transfer window, then somewhere along the line, there must have been some sort of encouragement that is the player open to the move? Have the club made it clear that maybe if the price is right, we would be prepared to do business on this particular player? I'm not saying that's happened in this case, but usually if a club approaches another club, it is because somewhere along the line there has been some sort of encouragement. Newcastle United, let's make it clear, they hold the cards here. Alexander Isak has got 3 years left on his contract. They don't have to sell. They've got a player under contract. They're paying him good money. He hasn't gone physically up to Newcastle United and said, look, I want to go. And even if he did, Newcastle United don't have to do anything because he's under contract. But this interest in Isak and the subsequent noise around Ekitike poses the question, is there more to these two deals than meets the eye? Newcastle, as Mark said, have had a £70 million bid rejected for Ekitike. Do they want him to play alongside Isak next season, or is he looked at as a replacement for Isak either next season or further along the line, maybe next summer, if Isak is eventually to leave Newcastle United? Liverpool, as Mark mentioned, conveniently now are interested in Hugo Ekitike as well. They are told by Newcastle Isak's not for sale, and they're now pursuing Newcastle's #1 target. Coincidence? Maybe. Face value? Yes. Otherwise, the cynic in every one of us thinks something else is going on here. There are so many questions to answer around this, not least if Newcastle United break their own transfer record, which they would have to do to get Hugo Ekitike in. Is that the end of their possible spending during this transfer window? Because we've been told throughout this summer's window, they're after a goalkeeper and they're after a central defender. If they bring in Hugo Ekitike, can they bring in those two players? Possibly not. But could they bring in those two players if they were to make a sale in this transfer window? And the biggest sale that they could make in this transfer window is a certain Alexander Isak.
But they do have until June next year, the end of June next year, to make a sale. So therefore, they could do what a lot of clubs do, is they say, right, let's get the player in now, but we know within the next 11 and a bit months, we're going to have to make a sale to meet our PSR requirements. So therefore, you get the player in and we'll worry about generating some money down the line. And that's what they possibly could think. So a lot of Newcastle fans will say, well, I'm a bit concerned we're going to put all our financial eggs in one basket. Where does that leave us? Like Dharmesh says, we wanted a goalkeeper. We've been linked with James Trafford. They've attempted to try and get a deal over the line there. They also have been linked with centre-backs in the last 12 months. Mark Gay was of interest this time last year. We need to strengthen the squad. We've got a Champions League campaign. Do we want to put ourselves in a vulnerable position where actually we've got two outstanding signings in Hugo Ekitike, should they get a deal done, and Anthony Elanga, but we need strength in other areas? I get the feeling they might still be looking at targeting those positions as well. They may just have to tweak what they do financially, but Eddie Howe very much wants to strengthen the squad in those areas as well as the deals that they're looking to do at the moment.
The scenarios that Newcastle United are looking at in this transfer window, there's probably a dream scenario. The dream scenario is Hugo Ekitike comes to St James's Park and he plays alongside Alexander Isak next season, and maybe they can generate money in other areas and still go into the market and bring in a goalkeeper and a central defender, because let's be honest, they're fighting on four fronts next season.
Generate money, you mean by making sales, or?
Potentially by making sales, yes, but not necessarily the biggest sale that everyone is talking about in Isak, because the dream scenario would be Isak and Ekitike playing alongside each other at St James's Park next season. This is a player, as Mark was mentioning, he's mentioned it to me off air before, it's not someone that's just come along in this transfer window, Ekitike. They've been tracking Ekitike for quite a while now.
For a couple of seasons, haven't they?
So it's not something that's just crept up on everybody, that their interest in Ekitike. The mid scenario would probably be Ekitike doesn't come to Newcastle United, but they keep Alexander Isak. If Newcastle fans were given the choice, it's going to be one or the other, they would probably lean towards, would you agree, Alexander Isak staying at the club and not signing Hugo Ekitike. The nightmare scenario, Newcastle United fans probably don't want to hear this, is Hugo Ekitike doesn't come to Newcastle United and Alexander Isak leaves Newcastle United. And then you've got a really nightmare scenario where who's going to be playing for Newcastle United up front next season. But that is something that looks very, very, very unlikely at this stage. But it is clear that there is noise around Alexander Isak, as much as Newcastle United fans don't want to hear it, because we do know that Liverpool are interested in the player, but there's also huge noise around Hugo Ekitike as well. but there are two clubs who are very interested in him. Eintracht Frankfurt have already rejected one bid for him. Is that partly on the say-so of Ekitike and the fee, or has Ekitike kind of made his mind up as well where he wants to go?
Yeah, there's about three things that came to mind while you were talking there. One thing that Newcastle could do is something they've done in the past. They could sign a goalkeeper on loan with an obligation that kicks in the next financial year. That's something they've done before. That's something that other clubs also do. They could also say Alexander Isak, right, not for sale. However, they may privately say, if we can get through the summer and convince him that his future is at Newcastle, he could sign a new contract over the course of the next 12 months, which would change the dynamic next summer. And there was one other point which I was going to say, and I can't remember it because we've been chatting, but there are little things that can shift and change the dynamic of these deals, these relationships with the players, and what might happen. My gut feeling at the moment is that Hugo Ekitike is headed to Liverpool. I feel like the deal for him to go to Newcastle is unlikely at this stage, but things change in football like that. One phone call and suddenly everything shifts. And I think the point I was going to make as well is that we cover every inch of transfers where possible. And at Sky Sports News, we try and be as accurate as we possibly can with the information we have with our sources. Sometimes there can be a lot of noise around a certain thing happening, but it doesn't mean it's true. And sometimes agents and clubs can use the media and use social media as a powerful tool for them to generate noise where everyone thinks, this is happening, but actually the club's going, right, while all that noise is over there and you're all looking at that, we're just going to go about our business quietly round the back and get this done. And sometimes that's a big factor in transfers. So whilst everyone's talking about Newcastle and Hugo Ekitike, could Liverpool be saying, OK, no worries, we like that noise because that means we can operate quickly and quietly in the background?
I think one person who is in a fantastic position is Alexander Isak. He's got 3 years left on a lucrative contract at Newcastle United. He's going to be playing Champions League football next season with Newcastle United. The champions of England are interested in signing him. Newcastle United, with all of that noise going on at the moment, will want to tie him down to a new contract. That new contract will be better than the one he's got at the moment, will be more lucrative than the one he's got at the moment. So Alexander Isak, he's in an absolutely fantastic position, but he has earned that position because he's been so fantastically good for Newcastle United.
And the fans love him.
Yeah,
and playing at St James's Park and being in that city where you are absolutely adored as the King of Kings is a great place to be. Just to flip side what Dharmesh has said there, because this is quite an open dialogue and we don't really have a script in this part of the show because we're just chatting. But in 12 months' time, the whole landscape of what football clubs are looking for in the market could change, right? We know that Arsenal are looking for a striker at the moment, close to Victor Gyökeres. We know that Liverpool are in the market for a striker, close to potentially Hugo Ekitike. They've opened talks. You know, this time in 12 months, are Arsenal looking for a striker? Probably not. Are Liverpool looking for a striker? Probably not. Erling Haaland signed a long-term deal at Manchester City. We know that Chelsea have been in the market and got strikers in this window. So where is a likely destination should Alexander Isak be in the market and available this time next year? He might be thinking, actually, I'm going to stay at Newcastle. I'm going to create history. I'm going to be a part of this exciting project because I believe this is where my future lies.
Wow, it's intriguing, isn't it? We'll be keeping our eyes peeled to see how this one plays out. We're going to take a short break, and after the break, Manchester United's second bid for Bryan Mbeumo was rejected at the end of June. When we come back, we'll let you know how things stand. More on that. We'll let you know. Now to some brutal criticism of Marcus Rashford from Teddy Sheringham, who has claimed the Manchester United forward does not deserve a move to Barcelona. Sheringham, who of course won the treble with United, claims the whole situation surrounding Rashford's potential departure is soul-destroying, and he's questioned the player's professionalism. Well, Rashford has returned to United's training base at Carrington this week, despite being offered extra time off following his loan spell at Aston Villa. The England forward is one of 5 United players who have said they want to leave. Last week, we reported Rashford was Barcelona's #1 left-wing target. Well, here's what Sheringham has actually had to say. If you assess where Marcus Rashford is at as a professional footballer, you strive as a youngster to get to the very top and play for clubs like Manchester United. And when you're there, you appreciate it. You don't throw it away and say you want to leave. I find the whole episode very soul-destroying compared to the way I was back in the day and how I strove to get the privilege to play for such a huge football club. To hear someone talking the way he is talking, saying he wants out, I didn't like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang doing that at Arsenal. I thought it was soul-destroying, and I hope Rashford doesn't get the move that he's hankering for. From my perspective, if you go from Manchester United to Barcelona, that's a step up that he hasn't deserved. Yeah, Mark, really strong words there. What did you make of what Sheringham had to say?
Well, Teddy Sheringham's one of those iconic Premier League players and was a part of a hugely successful era, not only at Tottenham, but of course Manchester United, and played, well into his 40s. I remember watching him play for Colchester in his 40s. So when a player of his calibre, his knowledge, experience, sits up and says things, you take notice. He's been there, done it and got the T-shirt. No question about his words being very, very powerful. And if that's how he views the situation, then he, as a former Manchester United player, absolutely has the right. When we look at the current situation, we know that Barcelona are interested in Marcus Rashford and he is their number one target at this stage for that left-wing berth that they're looking to recruit for. There's been still no formal offer from Barcelona to Manchester United. However, they do remain interested. I think the most positive and powerful thing that Barcelona have on their side is that they know that Marcus Rashford is desperate to play for them at Barcelona, and he's made no secret about his desire to head over to Spain. The problem will be finance, and that's where Manchester United...
His salary?
His salary. And Manchester United will be looking at a player through their academy and saying, well, actually, he represents 100% profit, so we want our £40 million, which was what was agreed with Aston Villa, but they decided not to exercise that option. So therefore, we need to get that kind of money because that's what we believe he's worth as a minimum.
Just aside of Rashford, there are a few other players
trying to get
that we do know that Manchester United have said, look, just delay your return to training, sort out your futures. One of those, of course, is Jadon Sancho. Interesting what's happening there at the moment because Juventus are very interested in Jadon Sancho. However, they're currently finalising a deal to sign the Porto forward, Francisco Conceição, who they had on a straight loan last season. And at the end of that, there was no option, but there was a release clause in his contract. Juventus were trying to negotiate on that release clause. Porto wanted 30 million euros up front. Juventus wanted to pay a little bit more in return for more favourable payment terms, which is what we think they've agreed to do. They're going to pay Porto 32 million euros and they'll pay that over 4 instalments. Now, the feeling was it was going to be one or the other, Conceição or Sancho, but the information that we're getting is that a deal for Sancho to Juventus has not been ruled out, but it is thought there would have to be departures at Juventus for them to be able to fund a deal for Sancho. Now, significantly, Marseille are in talks with Juventus over a potential deal for Timothy Weah. Now, that could help Juventus fund a deal for Jadon Sancho. Talks between United and Juve are open, as are talks between Juve and Sancho's representatives. As yet, there's not been an agreement on either. So there hasn't been an agreement on a transfer fee, and we talked about Rashford's wages. Sancho's on big wages as well. So Juventus remain in talks with his representatives over trying to find an agreement on the personal terms. It feels like the more problematic one would be the personal terms. And then Juventus could probably negotiate on the transfer fee with regard to Jadon Sancho. So no agreement on either front yet, but we think that Sancho's asking price is around £25 million, which is what Chelsea would have had to have paid had they taken up their obligation at the end of last season. Anthony, meanwhile, Real Betis, we know they remain desperate to sign Anthony. Anthony wants to go to Real Betis, had a really successful second half of last season at Real Betis. Difficult deal again for Real Betis to do given the finances involved. But these 5 players behind me, they're the ones that Manchester United want to do permanent deals for.
Alejandro Garnacho as well. Any updates on him? He carries on posting these cryptic social media posts.
Yeah, I mean, Manchester United, again, want to do deals for all five. There haven't been any formal offers, we think, at the moment. Napoli were interested earlier on in this transfer window, but they couldn't get a deal done. The noises around Garnacho would suggest that any deal, he would prefer a permanent deal to a Premier League club, so he wants to stay in England.
OK, so Manchester United trying to offload some players, but in terms of bringing a player in, Bryan Mbeumo still has not walked through that door, and we know that Manchester United are very interested. What's the latest?
People keep saying, what's going on?
I feel like I've asked this question more than any other this transfer window.
It's becoming a little bit of a transfer summer saga, isn't it? We know that Manchester United are interested. Their second offer was rejected. They remain confident that they can get a deal over the line for Bryan Mbeumo. We're expecting to see a third bid, which would probably be a final bid for the Brentford man. Manchester United would love to get this wrapped up and sorted before they go on their pre-season tour of the USA as well, and they very much want Bryan Mbeumo to be a part of that squad that travels with Ruben Amorim. The key thing is the fee and, most importantly, the structure of the payments. Brentford have always been quite staunch in that we want £65 million and we want the majority of that paid up front. So therefore, Manchester United are either going to have to be a little bit creative or they're going to have to find a softened stance from Brentford to get this deal over the line. I feel like I'm a broken record. I keep saying it feels like it's close. It feels like it's close.
Okay.
But until it feels Manchester United lodged that third bid, we're still just waiting for those moments.
Just off the back of that, I think
For those moments.
Brentford will wisely look at Mbeumo if he was to leave. They've got to prepare themselves that if the deal to Manchester United does materialise eventually, they're going to need to be in a position to start the season having replaced Bryan Mbeumo. And Omari Hutchinson from Ipswich Town is a player that they are very, very interested in. Now, I'm told that Brentford saw multiple approaches for Omari Hutchinson rebuffed by Ipswich Town on Tuesday. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the two clubs held talks on Tuesday and there was a 5 p.m. deadline on his relegation clause. So Omari Hutchinson had a relegation clause of £35 million. Now, it's thought that Brentford actually met that £35 million release clause, but didn't meet the conditions in which those the £35 million would be paid. So effectively, they failed to meet the conditions. So that deal didn't get done. 5 p.m. on Tuesday came and went. So now that relegation clause is no longer active, is no longer valid. So Ipswich Town effectively are in a bit more control of this situation because they can ask for what they want now for Omari Hutchinson. We expect Brentford to go back in. They do remain interested. Ipswich have got no intention of selling Omari Hutchinson, but having no intention of selling and actually selling are two different things. It's not a case of he is not for sale because every player has got his price. And if Brentford do come back in with a figure and a structure of payments that Ipswich Town think, do you know what? It's something we can't refuse at the moment, then there is still a possibility that this deal can get done. Hutchinson, for his part, still got 4 years left on his contract. But when Ipswich Town made those, but they made so many signings, didn't they, last summer, they included these relegation clauses in the contracts just to make sure that if some of their big players were to end up leaving, they would be in a position where they could still get big money for them and then reinvest it to go back up from the Championship into the Premier League next season.
And is that deal dependent on whether they let Mbeumo go, or will they?
I think there's an independent interest in Omari Hutchinson, but he is clearly a player that Brentford will be looking at if Mbeumo was to go, because it's no point Brentford being in a position of trying to get as much money as they can for Bryan Mbeumo and then say that deal happens really late and they haven't got anything or any player to replace him with. It's not how clubs do business. So that's why they are looking around for potential targets if and when Mbeumo leaves Brentford.
OK. For the moment, gents, thank you very much. We're going to be speaking Arsenal after the break because all the talk surrounding the Gunners has centred on their incomings, but there is big news surrounding the determination to keep one of their current young stars. Stay with us.
Hello, welcome back to the Transfer Show. Time now to go around the clubs. Dharmesh, take it away.
Wow.
It was dramatic, wasn't it?
It was. Good pause there. Arsenal close to agreeing a new long-term contract with forward Ethan Nwaneri. He has entered the final year of his current deal.
Reports suggest that Chelsea striker Nicholas Jackson could be a target for Aston Villa, reuniting him with Unai Emery, who was his head coach at Villarreal.
Bournemouth have signed keeper Jordi Petrovic from Chelsea for £25 million.
Brentford have seen multiple approaches for Amari Hutchinson, rejected by Ipswich. Brentford got close, but an agreement did not materialise over the structure of the payments.
18-year-old Brighton winger Yoon De-Jong has joined Eredivisie club Excelsior Rotterdam on a season-long loan.
Burnley have had a £10 million bid rejected by Watford for striker Mamadou Doumbia.
Question marks over the future of striker Nicholas Jackson, with a number of clubs interested in the Chelsea striker.
Eberechi Eze has returned to Crystal Palace training amid interest from Arsenal. The type of European football they play next season will be a big factor in his and any potential new signings' decision-making.
Mason Holgate has joined Qatari club Al Gharafa on a 2-year deal. He was a free agent after his contract at Everton expired.
Fulham club captain Tom Kearney is back on board for another year. His latest contract means he's about to start his 11th season at Craven Cottage.
Leeds United are pressing ahead with a move for Hoffenheim defensive midfielder Anton Stach after agreeing a fee for Newcastle's Sean Longstaff.
Liverpool have opened talks with Eintracht Frankfurt over the signing of striker Hugo Ekitike.
Eintracht Frankfurt and Nottingham Forest both pushing to sign Manchester City midfielder James McAtee.
Marcus Rashford is Barcelona's top left-wing target as Manchester United look to offload 5 players, including Jadon Sancho, Anthony, Alejandro Garnacho and Tyrell Malacia.
Newcastle United deciding whether to go back in for Eintracht Frankfurt striker Hugo Ekitike after having a £70 million bid rejected.
Nottingham Forest have signed 19-year-old Gambian striker Lamine Silla from Olympiacos. The Greek club is also owned by Evangelos Marinakis.
Listen to this, Sunderland are exploring an ambitious move to sign Bayer Leverkusen midfielder Granit Xhaka.
Tottenham Hotspur's move for Morgan Gibbs-White has stalled as Nottingham Forest threatened legal action over their approach for the England midfielder. Spurs had triggered his £16 million release clause.
West Ham United in the market for more signings after the signing of left-back El Hadji Malik Diouf.
Well done. Wolves remain close to completing a move for Fluminense winger Jean Arias for £15 million. And that completes the Premier League wrap.
Great work there, gents. Now, Sean Longstaff has left Newcastle's camp in Austria ahead of his proposed move to Leeds. That deal is close, but could this be their most important bit of business this summer? Dan James recently signed a new 4-year contract extension at the club after cementing himself as a key part of Daniel Farke's side with 21 goal contributions.
Yeah, I'm delighted. I'm just, really happy to get it done early in pre-season, just concentrate on my football now. But, yeah, this... it's been amazing these last 4 years that I've been here, and I'm just happy to extend that and just continue. For us, this is a club, we want to establish ourselves as a Premier League team. We know that's going to be really tough. You look at the last few years, it's to go up and stay there is so hard. Every year the competition is getting more, and for us it's just about can we establish ourselves as a Premier League team, and our aim is to stay there.
Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Premier League is less than a month away now. We've got a bumper opening weekend of action on Sky Sports. It kicks off with champions Liverpool at home to Bournemouth on that Friday. That's the 15th of August, and concludes with Leeds back in the top flight hosting Everton at Ellen Road on the Monday Night Football. And as you would see there, Arsenal start their campaign against great rivals Manchester United. And we're going to talk about the Gunners now because they remain on the brink of a triple signing that could be in excess of £120 million. Mark, Victor Gyökeres, how many times do I have to ask you before you tell me he's signed, it's a done deal? What's the latest?
Not as many as the times you've asked about Brian Mbeumo.
OK.
We're still going strong with this one. Yeah, so Arsenal are close to an agreement with Sporting Lisbon for the striker, the 27-year-old you can see there on the back of your screen, Victor Gyökeres. We understand that they have agreed the fixed fee part of this potential transfer deal, which is £55 million. the add-ons are now being discussed. And one of the reasons why this deal has moved a step closer to being completed is because the agent has agreed to waive a chunk of his fee, which has helped Arsenal and Sporting Lisbon get this deal a step closer. The other thing to point out as well is that Coventry are due around 10% of any profit that Sporting Lisbon make on this one. They sold him to Sporting a couple of summers ago for around £21 million. So if they're going to get about 70 million, give or take, depending on add-ons, that could be worth £4 to £5 million for Frank Lampard and that Coventry City side, which would be huge in the Championship to inject there. So they're so close. It's just those final details and the structure of those add-ons which are so crucial to getting this one done. But it feels like now it's only a matter of time before Arsenal fans can turn around and say, finally, we've got the striker that we've been craving for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 windows.
And Dharmesh, is it just a matter of time for Madueke and Mosquera?
Certainly looks that way. Madueke, Noni Madueke, this one is as good as done. Personal terms on a 5-year deal have been agreed. Just a reminder of the deal, Arsenal will pay Chelsea an initial £48.5 million plus £3.5 million in performance-related add-on, so a total fee of £52 million. Formal announcement on that one is expected soon. Christian Mosquera, meanwhile, he's a defender from Valencia. He's in London for a medical ahead of his move. He's only had a year left on his contract at Valencia. Valencia trying to tie him down to a new longer-term contract, but once Arsenal came in, his mind was made up. He wanted to go. And so Valencia were in a bit of a situation. They thought if we keep him for another year, we'll lose him for free. He can basically talk to Arsenal in January about a pre-contract agreement and we'll lose him for nothing. So I think they're trying to come up with a compromise on a price. They wanted £25 million. We think Arsenal will pay a little bit less than that. It's an initial £13 million plus add-ons. And again, that one should be sorted in the next few days.
So of all those incomings, Mark, is Arsenal still interested in Eza?
They are. It's something that Dharmesh has been saying for the last couple of weeks on these transfer shows. The targets were a 10, a left winger and a striker, so they potentially were looking to recruit 3 new faces during the course of this summer transfer window. We know that they're interested in Eberechi Eza. They've been exploring the conditions of a potential deal. The key thing is that Eza would be open to moving to North London as well, which always makes things a lot easier. We understand that there is a release clause in that Crystal Palace contract of 60 million guaranteed with 8 million in add-ons. So it could be potentially as well, and what a sum of this would be, Noni Madueke, Victor Gyökeres and Eberechi Eza. That would completely transform what Arsenal have. When you add the young players and Bukayo Saka, suddenly Arsenal fans will be licking their lips saying, this is the type of squad, this is the type of strength and depth we want. These are the types of players that we believe can finally get us over the line.
Yeah, imagine that. And as well as, you know, all those incomings, they, of course, will make the headlines. Arsenal spending money. But, Dharmesh, it's also important that Arsenal tie down their young stars as well, and that's exactly what they've done.
Absolutely. Look, the 3 players that are already in at Arsenal, new signings, 3 more are almost guaranteed to be confirmed in the next week or so. Miles Lewis-Skelly signed a new contract earlier on in this transfer window, and now it looks like Ethan Nwaneri is going to follow suit as well. I think Arsenal are advancing in talks over a new deal and a new long-term contract for Nwaneri. There's a willingness and a confidence from all parties now to conclude this deal. He's entered the final year of his current deal at Arsenal, so it was really quite emergent that Arsenal tied Nwaneri down now. They didn't want him going 6 months from the end of his contract without sorting this deal out. There was plenty of interest, as you would expect, from home and abroad for the 18-year-old. But it was clear that his desire was always to stay at Arsenal. And he had such a breakthrough season, didn't he, last season? Probably he himself and probably Arsenal didn't expect him to play as many matches as he did. But the injury to Bukayo Saka opened up an opportunity for Nwaneri. I think he scored 9 goals for Arsenal in all competitions last season, and it looks like he's going to be there for the long term as well.
Wow, big competition for places in this Arsenal team. And speaking of Arsenal, could their former player, Granit Xhaka, be coming back to the Premier League? More next on the deals bubbling under the headlines. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Now let's talk about a number of potential moves that are just bubbling under the surface nicely. And Dharmesh, we spoke about Manchester United before and the fact they're trying to offload those 5 players. But we know that they're trying to offload those 5 players. All of their rivals know that.
Yeah.
Does that mean that those rivals can then offer under the cush for these 5? I mean, how does United get rid of these players?
Well, look, I touched on this a bit earlier on, but Manchester United's preference for all of these 5 players is to do permanent sales for them. Right. However, that is easier said than done. If they were to do permanent sales for all of them, you're looking at 125 to 150 million pounds that they could glean to rebuild again in this transfer window. However, the interested clubs for most of these players are also discussing not only a permanent deal, but also a loan deal as well. Now, as far as United are concerned, if it is to be loans for any of these players, they would want a permanent element attached to that, so maybe an obligation at the end of that deal. They would also want to be quite creative with their loans, and they have done this kind of thing before. If you look back to the example of Jadon Sancho, he had 2 loan spells when he's been at Manchester United, one with Borussia Dortmund and one with Chelsea. Now, the one with Borussia Dortmund, Manchester United actually made a profit on his wages in that time. People ask, how did Manchester United do that? Well, it was an incentivised wage percentage that they did. So basically, when they let him go to Borussia Dortmund, they said, we're going to pay a percentage of these wages. But depending on how well he does and how well Borussia Dortmund do, the percentage that Manchester United pay will go down, the percentage that Borussia Dortmund pay will go up. And it went up in an increasing scale, to the point that Borussia Dortmund made the Champions League final in 2024. And because they did that, the wages that they actually paid Manchester United for Jadon Sancho exceeded 100%. Hence why Manchester United actually made a profit on those wages. They did something quite different with Chelsea. They attached a permanent obligation at the end of that loan spell. But they also said, right, Chelsea, you've got to pay £25 million at the end of the season. If you don't do the obligation, then there is going to be a penalty of £5 million that you are going to have to pay us for not taking up that obligation. Chelsea ended up not taking up that obligation and then had to pay Manchester United that £5 million. So I think whatever Manchester United do with these 5 players, number one priority would be permanent, but loans cannot be ruled out, but they will be creative with them like they did with Sancho in the past 2 spells that he had away from the club.
OK, Mark, coming to the last few minutes of the transfer show, we're going to rumble through a few names now, and Granit Xhaka could be making a return to the Premier League.
Yeah, Bundesliga winner, hugely experienced 32-year-old. Obviously, Arsenal fans very familiar with this man. This is being described as a really ambitious transfer target for Sunderland. We know that they are exploring a potential deal for Granit Xhaka. We also know that there is interest from Saudi Arabia in the player as well, so it makes it quite difficult because they're competing against the finances that potentially they could offer. Sunderland have really come to the transfer table, haven't they, this summer? They spent already £95 million. It's a very young squad. It was the youngest average team in the Championship last season for Regis Lebris, so therefore the experience of this man could prove vital, particularly in the Premier League. One to watch.
Dharmesh, James McAtee attracting a lot of interest.
Certainly is. The Manchester City midfielder was the under-21 captain for England in their successful Euros as well. So, you know, had a few games for Manchester City last season. I think showed a few people that he has got quite a bit of talent and he's attracting a lot of interest. Well, his representatives have been in Germany having talks with Eintracht Frankfurt. They have since returned from Frankfurt, having had those talks. No agreement, but the Eintracht Frankfurt still remains an option for James McAtee. There's a number of Premier League clubs as well who are interested in James McAtee, and we understand that Nottingham Forest are one of those clubs who are pushing quite hard to try and sign him in this transfer window.
Mark, there's another one of Bournemouth's impressive players from last season attracting interest as well?
Yeah, Ilya Zabani, excuse me. We know that PSG have had 2 offers rejected by Bournemouth. I'd imagine that if you go to the dance floor twice and you don't get the person you want, you're probably going to go back a third and final time and see if you can get the deal over the line.
I don't know, mate. I'd go once on the dance floor, that's it.
That's it?
For me, I'm done.
OK, maybe we'll see Dharmesh on the dance floor.
You're the party starter, Dharmesh.
There we go.
Maybe.
I'll let you two dance off. This man,
Later.
I'd imagine that PSG will come in for a third and what potentially could be final time to get the Ukraine international. He had a sensational season under Andoni Iraola last season in Bournemouth's record-breaking campaign, 2 knockback bids. I'd imagine that there will be a third. It'll be one to watch, and it won't be good news for Bournemouth fans. But they do have some positivity, though, because they announced the signing of the goalkeeper from Chelsea for £25 million, Jorda Petrovic. He signed a 5-year contract down at the Vitality Stadium. Serbia international. He spent last season on loan at Strasbourg, where he was outstanding. Mauricio Pochettino absolutely loved him. 23 Premier League appearances for Chelsea, and now he's Bournemouth's #1.
Brilliant from Bournemouth. Dharmesh, we had Ashley Young on this very show, the transfer show, just a few days ago. He wants to carry on playing. What can you tell us about his latest moves?
I mean, this could represent quite a fairy tale if it is to be the end of his career.
Brilliant. This is my favourite
If
signing.
it is, because Watford remain interested in signing Ashley Young, of course, where he started his long and illustrious career. It's understood talks actually happened between Watford and Young's representatives earlier on in this transfer window, and I'm told that the lines of communication have remained open. However, there are a couple of other Championship clubs who are interested in Ashley Young, and I think him and his representatives want to see what all the options are before they decide on what potentially, you can never say never with Ashley Young, what potentially could be the final move of his career. He turned 40, believe it or not, last week. But, as you mentioned, he was on the transfer show with us on Sunday evening, and he did say, I do want to carry on playing. Let's see if he gets his wish. But there are a number of clubs who are interested.
I want someone to buy him and his son and play them together.
That would be fantastic,
That's my
wouldn't
dream.
it? 40 years young. Dharmesh, just finally, one last line on Reece Nelson. What can you tell us?
Yeah, this one reaching us just in the past few minutes. It was originally brought out by Sami Mokbel, and it is that Fulham have made an approach to Arsenal to sign Reece Nelson. Now, you remember, Reece Nelson was actually on loan last season at Fulham. Started off really well, but then got a really serious hamstring injury in December. Didn't feature for the rest of the season, but obviously has done enough for Fulham to want to go back. We think that it is for another loan spell at Fulham, but because he's only got 2 years left on his contract, it would make sense that Arsenal might want some sort of permanent element attached to that deal, if it's an option or an obligation, because with 2 years left, if he's just going to go for one season back to Craven Cottage and then come back, then it might be difficult for Arsenal to get a deal for a player who's just got 1 year left on his contract. But definitely one to watch. Yeah. Fulham like what they saw in the few games that he played last season. Let's see if they can get him again. Yeah, best of luck to him. We want to see him playing at his top level again, don't we? Dharmesh, Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. The transfer show is back. You don't have long to wait. Sunday, 7 o'clock. Dharmesh will be at the wheel for that one. Coming up, all eyes on this man, Rory McIlroy, on the eve of the Open. We'll be hearing from him next.